Good evening to you. Namaskara. Am I audible, Kulkarni sir? I think I am audible. I am yet to get his response. Abhinaya Bharati viewers, theatre goers, theatre lovers, Dr. Arvind Kulkarni, Dr. V.T. Nayak, and all my dear friends. I have been asked to speak on Aristotle's Poetics and analysis. We all know that Aristotle was the first major European critic. And he's still very relevant. And he's still very important for all the theatre pundits. Aristotle is mainly known for his small treatise, small book, the Poetics. He was a disciple of Plato and the teacher of Alexander the Great. And Plato's view of literature is heavily conditioned by the atmosphere of political concern which pervaded Athens at the time. Aristotle belongs to a later stage in which the role of Athens as a secondary minor power seems definitely settled. His views on literature does not answer any immediate political theory. And consequently, his critical approach is more intrinsic. Aristotle's work on the theory of literature is the treatise usually called the Poetics, written in 330 BC. Only part of it has survived, and that in the form of notes for a course, and not as a developed theoretical treatise. I would like to, in the beginning, I would like to make two things very clear to you, rather to myself, that Aristotle did not write any book. He gave lectures and notes to his pupils on various subjects like the politics and the poetry, tragedy, comedy, tragicomedy, etc., etc. And they noted down his lecture, and which later on appeared in the form of book. The Poetics, in this sense, is not a book. It's not a full book. And as I said, only a part of it has survived. But for the last 2,500 years, we have been talking about this book, the Poetics. This is the basis for all European literature to come in later years, and all the critical theories that have come up in the recent in the last century, 20th century and 21st centuries. I don't think that they have come far away from the Poetics. So Aristotle is a benchmark for European critical thinking or for European critical thought process. And they have not lost their this touch. They have not lost the touch with their tradition. But in the case of India, we have lost it. And you cannot talk about literature produced some 2,000 years ago. There are people to condemn you, to attack you for referring to the Sanskrit literature and so on. I don't want to waste my time talking about this this issue. So, in Poetics, Aristotle talks about poetry. He talks about lyrical poetry. He talks about the epic. He talks about drama, tragedy, comedy, and he talks about different parts of drama, etc., etc. So I will focus on I will only focus on Aristotle's views on drama. I confine myself to Aristotle's views on drama in my lecture today. So, Plato and Aristotle, Plato was his teacher, and Plato's understanding of literature was had some problem, and his own pupil Aristotle had to come on the scene to correct his own master. He failed to understand the nature of poetry. He failed to understand the nature of literature. And for Plato, literature meant a photocopy, a photocopy, a copy of the reality. What was important for Plato was the idea, because he was mainly a philosopher. He was not a pragmatist, he was a philosopher. And he loved the idea. And he wanted to create an ideal republic in which he gave no place to the poets. He said, I would ban poets from my ideal republic because they mislead the society and they corrupt the minds of the young people and they appeal to emotions. And emotions were not very important for Plato. Ideas were very important. And his complaint was poets were liars. They tell lies, which is partly true. And they also imitate. They imitate nature, they imitate reality, they imitate reality. That is mimesis, which I'll be coming back to this later. And it's only a copying, he says. A poet merely copies nature, reality, or an idea. There is no point in it. There is no originality in it. Aristotle said it is not a copying, it's not merely a copying, it's not a reproduction of reality, or it is not a reproduction of an idea or a thought or an experience, etc. It is a recreation. A poet recreates. A poet has what you call poetic imagination. So imagination is very, very important. He talks about it. Okay, this is the debate. This is the bone of contention between Plato and Aristotle. Then I will straight come to my topic. Aristotle's concept of tragedy. So I begin with his definition of tragedy. Tragedy, I quote, tragedy then is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in the language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play, in the form of action, not of a narrative, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation or catharsis of these and similar emotions. This is the classic definition of tragedy. And the critics who came after Aristotle have talked about this catharsis effect and this definition. Some, they agreed and they disagreed, but the point is they still talk about this famous definition of tragedy by Aristotle. Let me explain the definition for a while. Tragedy is an imitation of an action. This is very important. About action, he explains what he means by action. It imitates. He agrees with Plato that literature is an imitation. Literature is an imitation of life. It is an imitation of reality. It's not. So in that sense, tragedy also imitates. What does it imitate? It imitates an action. And what kind of action is it? An action that is serious. It should be serious. Tragedy does not deal with lighter stuff. Tragedy does not deal with the base emotions. It deals with the subject which is universal and which is very, very, very serious. Take the example of Oedipus or Antigone or Orestes or Dr. Faustus or any tragedy of William Shakespeare. They're all serious. And this is an imitation of an action. That is serious and it is complete. Number one, serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude. These three words are very important in understanding Aristotle's concept of tragedy or his definition of tragedy. It is an imitation of action, number one, and that action is serious, two, and it is complete and of a certain magnitude. Then he talks about the language of tragedy. In the language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, in his Poetics he explains the kind of language that has to be used or should be used or that is used in tragedy. He talks about diction and he talks about sentences, he talks about metaphors, images, etc., etc. I may not explain all of it to you because, to teach the Poetics, I need minimum 6 months. It's a small book, but, it's a great book. Then he says, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play in the form of action. The play is, or tragedy is in the form of action, not of narrative. It doesn't narrate. He puts a greater emphasis on the performative aspect of the play, tragedy. Okay, things are not narrated, things are enacted, things are acted out. So it is in the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear, effecting the proper purgation, catharsis of these and similar emotions. The last part of his definition is very important. He talks about the effect of tragedy. What effect, the effects of tragedy on the mind and heart of the spectator or the reader. So tragedy should invoke or create pity and fear in the minds and in the hearts of the spectators. Not only creating pity and fear, it should also purge them, catharsis, satisfy them. I'll come back to this definition later. So, Aristotle is very clear about tragedy. He says a play should have action. Aristotle identifies tragedy as the most refined version of poetry dealing with lofty matters. The subject matter of tragedy, should not be an ordinary experience. Because the purpose of tragedy is to create fear and pity and fear. Okay, and if the subject matter, the plot of the play is very weak, is very ordinary, then the purpose cannot be achieved. So Aristotle identifies tragedy as the most refined version of poetry. He doesn't, in fact, Aristotle doesn't differentiate between tragedy and epic poetry or poetry. So tragedy also means poetry. And what kind of poetry is it? This is the most refined version of poetry. It is not just poetry. Tragedy is not just poetry. It is the most refined version of poetry which deals with lofty matters, great matters, matters of national importance and significance, matters of universal appeal. I'll come back to it later. So Aristotle defines tragedy according to 7 characteristics. He attributes 7 characteristics to tragedy. Number 1, it is mimetic. Tragedy is mimetic. Mimetic means imitative. all art is imitation. Aristotle says, all art is imitation. And you imitate life, artist imitates life or reality idea in three ways. Okay, an artist imitates life as it is, or as it were, or as it ought to be, or as it should be. There are three ways in which reality is imitated, life is imitated, and idea is imitated. So he says it's not just reproduction, it is recreation. So the first characteristic feature of tragedy is its imitative quality, imitation, mimetic. And second, it is serious. Take the example of any tragedy, Oedipus. I will give the example of Oedipus later. It is serious. Third, it tells a full story of an appropriate length, of a certain magnitude. Remember, he said of a certain magnitude. So that magnitude here refers to the an appropriate length, an appropriate length. In a way, he talks about the acts and scenes of a play. So it tells a full story, complete story, and of an appropriate length. It contains rhythm and harmony. Just in painting also you find colors. In music you find the notes, and in tragedy and poetry you find rhythm and harmony. It has something to do with the language, diction, and thought, etc., etc. Fifth one, rhythm and harmony occur in different combinations in different parts of the tragedy. Read any tragedy, you will understand how rhythm and harmony occur in different combinations in different parts of the play. Especially if you read Hamlet or Macbeth or King Lear, Othello, or Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, Oedipus, Antigone. Then the sixth important feature of tragedy is it is performed rather than narrated. He talks about the spectacle, the stage, and scenery, stage, and other attributes. And the last characteristic feature, which is very important, is it arouses feelings of pity and fear, and then purges these feelings through catharsis. These are the 7 important characteristic features of tragedy according to Aristotle. Then he talks about the 6 important components of tragedy. A tragedy consists of 6 component parts. I will give you the list. Number 1, plot. 2, character. 3, thought. 4, diction. 5, melody, song. And last one, spectacle. And Aristotle spends a lot of his energy, his talent, his creative power, etc. in explaining the first 3 components, the first 2 components, plot and character. He invests a lot of his talent, his speculative mental power, his understanding of literature, poetry, everything in explaining, in writing about these 2 components, plot and character. And I will explain plot and character in detail. What is plot? Plot is the proper structure of the story. The proper structure of the story. And unity of the plot does not consist in the unity of the hero. He treats these separately, character and plot. So plot does not mean character. So unity of the plot does not consist in the unity of the hero. In a man's life, there can be various incidents which cannot be reduced to unity. He gives the example of, for example, Aristotle says, a playwright, a writer of tragedy should know what incidents he should put in his plot. And in a man's life, many incidents happen. Various incidents happen. You cannot bring all incidents into a play. It cannot happen. He gives the example of Homer. So in composing Odyssey, Homer did not include all the adventures of Odyssey. He made the Odyssey, likewise the Iliad, to center round an action that in our sense of the term is one. So tragedy should deal with one single action. One single action. For example, take the example of Hamlet. So Hamlet is procrastination, and Macbeth, over-ambition. King Lear, stupidity, foolishness, and Othello, jealousy. Tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete and serious. So Aristotle says the unity of an action means you cannot deal with all aspects of a man you are going to focus on. He gives the example of Homer, and when he writes the Iliad and the Odyssey, he does not put all the incidents that have happened in their lives. So it is not the function of the poet to relate what has happened, but what may happen. This is an important observation made by Aristotle in his Poetics. And he talks about the difference between history and literature, history and poetry. What is the poet's job? What is the duty of a poet? What is the function of a poet? He says, it is not the function of the poet to relate what has happened, but what may happen. What may happen? What is possible according to the law of probability or necessity. A poet does not relate or explain what has happened. What may happen tomorrow, what may happen, and what is possible according to the law of probability or necessity. So a poet is not interested in possibilities. A poet is interested in probabilities. Something which you are presenting may not be possible, but it should be probable. This probable possibilities to improbable possibilities. He talks about this. I will come back to it later. So the poet and a historian differ not by writing in verse and prose, because a historian writes in prose, he is a historian, and a poet writes in verse, he is a poet. No, we cannot say like that. The true difference is one relates what has happened, the other what may happen. A historian will explain or tells what has happened. A poet tells us what may happen. Poetry is a more philosophical and a higher thing than history. So Plato can understand history better. He cannot understand poetry. So it's a more philosophical and a higher thing than history. For poetry tends to express the universal. Poetry expresses universal. Tragedy expresses universal. History, the particular. Let me give you the example of Carnot's Tughlaq. And Tughlaq in history is a historical character. It's a particular. Okay, he is the 13th century Muslim king in history. But in Carnot's play Tughlaq, he does not represent the 13th century Mughal king. I mean the Muslim king. He becomes universal. Macbeth, Tughlaq in Carnot's play becomes universal. And who is Tughlaq? You are Tughlaq. I am Tughlaq. Now we say, he is Tughlaq. He is Tughlaq. So Tughlaq becomes universal. And by the universal, Aristotle means how a person of a certain type will on occasion speak or act is universal according to the law of probability or necessity. In a given situation, even in a given context, a person of a certain type, how can he speak and how can he act? Okay, this is universal, and any man in any country, in any age, in a similar situation, in a certain situation, will behave and will act the same. But in history, it's not like that. Particular. History is interested in particulars, and literature, poetry is interested in the universal. Then he talks about the different kinds of plots. He says simple plot and complex plot and episodic plot. Simple, complex, and episodic. Of all plots and actions, the episodic are the worst. He doesn't like the episodic plots. Tragedy is an imitation not only of all complete action, but of events terrible and pitiful. Tragedy imitates an action, or it imitates events that are terrible and pitiful. Take the example. I don't have time. You just remember Oedipus Rex. Such an effect is best produced when the events come on us by surprise, and the effect is heightened. The effect is heightened when at the same time they follow cause and effect. Yeah, this is very important statement. Cause and effect. Cause and effect. So you do some action, and for that action something follows. So cause and effect. Cause and effect. An action and its repercussions. Okay, you kill somebody, it will have its own repercussions. You hurt somebody, it will have its own repercussions. You speak something, it will have its own repercussions. So cause and effect. Cause and effect. And this effect is best produced when the events come on us by surprise. They should come to us by surprise. I will come back to it later. So plots are either simple or complex. For the actions in real life of which the plots are in imitation obviously show a similar distinction. Simple, he explains what a simple plot is. When the change of fortune takes place without reversal of intention and without recognition. He uses two technical terms for this. One is peripeteia, and another is ignominous. I will come back to it later. So peripeteia means reversal of situation, reversal of intention. I will explain it later. So a simple plot is one in which the change of fortune takes place without reversal of intention and without recognition. A complex action is one in which the change is accompanied by such reversal or by recognition or by both. So in a plot where reversal of intention takes place or recognition takes place is complex, and when it does not take place, it is simple. Reversal of intention is a change by which the action veers around to its opposite, subject always to our rule of probability or necessity. Thus, in the Oedipus, the messenger comes to cheer Oedipus and frees him from his alarms about his mother. He gives the example of Oedipus to explain what he means by reversal of intention. Reversal of intention. We all know the story of Oedipus. So when the play begins, Oedipus, the king, he wants to know why people are dying in his empire. Why do people die? What the problem is? Then he wants to know the reason. Who is responsible for the deaths that take place in my empire? and he wants to identify the culprit, the sinner. And it so happens that he is informed in the next act that he is the culprit and he is the sinner. This, Aristotle calls reversal of fortune. You expect something, something else happens. It's called reversal of fortune. And Oedipus comes to know that that he is responsible for the wrath of gods, and people are there is a plague, and people are dying because he is the sinner. He killed his own father and married his own mother, by whom he had 3 to 4 children. So recognition, as the name indicates, is a change from ignorance to knowledge. First of all, reversal of situation. Second, recognition. So what is recognition? We have a Sanskrit word for this, abhijnana shakuntalam, pratyabhijnana, abhijnana. So recognition is abhijnana. What happens in abhijnana? You recognize from ignorance to knowledge. I can give you the example of abhijnana shakuntalam. Dushyant, at the end of the play, he comes to know that Shakuntala is his wife when on seeing the ring that she has lost. He recognizes his wife. So from ignorance to knowledge. He thought he didn't marry her. Now he thinks he married her. So this is ignorance to knowledge, producing love or hate between the persons destined by the poet for good or bad fortune. The best form of recognition is coincident with a reversal of intention, as in the Oedipus. So in the case of Oedipus, both happen. Both the things happen. First of all, reversal of situation or intention. He wants to know who the enemy is, and he comes to know that he is the enemy himself. This is reversal. And recognition, he recognizes that he killed his father and married his own mother, with whom he is living and from whom he has 4 children. So 2 parts then of the plot, reversal of intention and recognition, turn upon surprises. They turn upon surprises. They surprise us. A 3rd part is the tragic incident. The tragic incident is a destructive or painful action, such as death, the stage, bodily agony, wounds, and the like, is called tragic incident. In Oedipus, when Oedipus comes to know that he killed his father, married his own mother, and he curses his eyes because they didn't recognize his parents. What he does, he takes out his both eyes. This is tragic incident. And his mother, who is his wife? She commits suicide. So this is tragic incident. A perfect tragedy should, as we have seen, be arranged not on the simple but on the complex plane. Aristotle says a perfect tragedy, a great tragedy, is arranged not on the simple but on the complex plane. It should moreover imitate action which excite pity and fear. So it's already 9 o'clock, and I think I need a lot of time to discuss all the points I have jotted down. I skip, and in next 10 minutes I'll conclude my presentation. He talks about pity and fear. Pity means when he talks about character, I should talk about character to explain what pity and fear. Second important, he says the plot is the soul of tragedy, and second important is character. And in respect of character, there are 4 things to be aimed at. First and most important, it must be good. A character, the character of a tragedy, the hero of a tragedy should be good. And he says he shouldn't be too good. If he is too good, then his death will not create pity in you. Will not create pity in you, because you don't want a good man to die. It will shock your sense of morality. So a saint or a philosopher, a very good man, cannot become the hero of a trustee. Similarly, a worst man, an utter villain, a completely bad man cannot become the hero of trustee, because when a bad man dies, you don't feel pity. For example, in the Mahabharata, I don't know whether this is the right example or not, because even when Duryodhana dies, we feel pity. Duryodhana is not a villain. He's not a villain. He's a perfect tragic hero. Perfect tragic hero. Duryodhana. And we feel pity for Duryodhana. He shouldn't have died. Hamlet, we say, no, he shouldn't have died. So when a good man dies, we feel pity. And why fear? Why fear? So he died because he committed a mistake. He died because he had a flaw in his character. He doubted his wife's chastity, and he was over ambitious, and he kept postponing the decision to murder, etc., etc. If I commit the mistake, I will also suffer like that. Okay, so these two feelings should be aroused in the spectator or reader. The feelings of pity and fear should be aroused in the audience, or in the audience, or in the spectators. Not just creating pity and the feelings of pity and fear, but also purging them, satisfying them, which he calls catharsis. It should have catharsis, effect. So the talking about character, Aristotle says character must be true to life. Must be true to life. And fourth is consistency. The character should be consistent. If he is good, he should be consistent in his good. If the character, the nature of a man, a tragic man, is inconsistent, he should be consistent in his inconsistency. The fourth is consistency. Be consistent. Still, he must be consistently inconsistent. As an example of motiveless degradation of character, we have Menelaus in the Orestes. Then he talks about different parts of tragedy. I'm sorry, I don't have time. Then he talks about plot. Plot is the soul of the tragedy. Then third in order is thought. Thought is the faculty of saying what is possible and pertinent in given circumstances. It is the faculty. Faculty means talent, genius, the wit to say what one has to say in given circumstances. For example, I give you the example of Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar is killed, Brutus makes a speech. Then comes Mark Antony, and he makes his famous speech. Romans, countrymen, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. So he makes that beautiful speech. So, and by which he turns, tables are turned. He succeeds in convincing the people of Rome that the murder of Julius Caesar is unjust and immoral. So this thought has something to do with the oratory, the way you present your case. Then diction is the expression of the meaning in verse. Its essence is the same both in verse and prose. Then comes melody, song. It holds the chief place among the embellishments. It's all about the beauty of the language of tragedy. And the last component of tragedy is the spectacle. For the power of tragedy is felt even apart from representation and actors. Okay, even as a play also, it can have its own effect on the mind of the reader. When it is performed on the stage, it will have more effect. So the spectacle is all about the stage. The production of spectacular effects depends more on the part of the stage mechanist than on that of the poet. Okay, the success of a play on the stage depends depends more on the theater mechanist. It could be director, it could be musician, or any other artist other than the playwright himself. Then he also talks about three unities: unity of action, unity of place, and unity of time. A tragedy should have one principal action. The unity of action limits the supposed action to a single set of incidents which are related as cause and effect, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. No scene is to be included that does not advance the plot, directly. He says, a good tragedy should have a complex plot, and this complex plot, should deal with a single action which is serious and complete. So, this unity of action in a tragedy should occur over a period of no more than 24 hours. Unity of place, a tragedy should exist in a single physical location. And his concept of unity of time, place, action holds water in the context of Greek tragedies. Shakespeare didn't have any respect for these three unities. And I will come back to this the feelings of pity and fear. For a tragedy to arouse pity and fear, we must observe a hero who is relatively noble, going from happiness to misery. The hero of tragedy, as I said, should be good, shouldn't be too good, but he should have a tragic flaw in it. Aristotle calls it hamartia. He should have a tragic flaw in him, because of which he should die at the end of the play. Okay, and if that happens, then pity and fear are aroused in us, and they're also purged. So, um, my dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, the Poetics is a small book, but it takes a lot of time to discuss all important aspects of this wonderful book on theatre. I have been able to explain only certain concepts, say important features of tragedy, and also important concepts of important components of tragedy. So, at the end, I should say that Aristotle, we cannot do away with Aristotle. We cannot go away from Aristotle's Poetics, especially his ideas on imitation. That all art is imitation is a statement which no critic can deny. Even today, yes, it is imitation. So, with these scattered remarks of mine on Poetics, on Aristotle's Poetics, I call it a day. I thank you for your. I don't know how you heard me. I thank you so much for watching this presentation, and I thank the organizers of Abhinaya Bharati, and I request all of you to take care of yourselves. Thank you so much. Good night and namaskar.